What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the music talk. We've got an upcoming versus battle between Rick Ross and 2 Chainz. Now after the Snoop Dogg versus DMX versus battle, I was wondering where they would go next, because that one is a tough act to follow. On social media, some wanted to see Usher versus Chris Brown, which Chris Brown made some delusional sounding comments in response. No knock to his catalog, but there's no way that CB's discography is more impactful than Usher's. You tripping. T.I. had been calling out 50 Cent. 50 Cent responds by trolling on Instagram, which I took to mean offer declined. I'm still waiting on that Bone Thugs and Harmony versus 3 6 Mafia. Has anyone heard the latest on that? Is it DOA or still in play? But right now, we've got Rick Ross versus 2 Chainz. Versus 2 Chainz! I feel like this one clearly has an A-side and a B-side, with Ross being the clear favorite with the higher charting albums, singles, and the higher overall profile and stature in the game, although it might be closer than you think. The first time I'd heard Rick Ross, it was on a 2002 Trina feature. Now it would be almost another half decade before he debuted with the Port of Miami album, which featured the hits Hustlin' and Push It. Every day I'm hustling. That was the one with the I know Noriega, the real Noriega, he owe me 100 favors line, which was pretty much the most memorable line of that track. And in this 2006-2007 period, DJ Khaled was also coming up big time, which provided an additional platform for hits that Ross was featured on, like We Taking Over and I'm So Hood. So beats-wise, this is when the South was almost in full control, where they went from the DJ Toomp era to Cool and Dre, to the Justice League, to the Runners. These were kind of the producers that were really popping just before the Lex Luger era, which then led into the 808 Mafia Metro Boomin era. So those two DJ Khaled posse cuts, which a lot of DJ Khaled songs are posse cuts because he himself isn't rapping, it's pretty much a party where it's all of his most esteemed invitees, or Ace Hood. But those two tracks, We Taking Over and I'm So Hood, should be featured in this versus battle. Both of those are from DJ Khaled's 2007 album, We The Best. I don't expect anything from Khaled's 2006 album, Listen, the album, but if there is, it'll probably be Holla At Me featuring Lil Wayne, Paul Wall, Fat Joe, Pitbull, and Rick Ross. You might hear that, but I doubt it because there's a lot of other Ross music that he's got to cover. Ross's Know What I'm Doing feature on Lil Wayne and Birdman's Like Father, Like Son album, that was the one with Stuntin' Like My Daddy, was another early Ross breakthrough, but I don't think we'll get that one either, but it could potentially be a sleeper pick. Now shifting gears, there was once a time when you couldn't turn on a radio without hearing a 2 Chainz single or a feature. This was mostly from 2010 to 2012, debut album. But like years before that, I'm talking 2007, just after Rick Ross's 2006 Port of Miami debut album, Play a Circle, that was 2 Chainz' group at the time, had a track that was all over the streets and radio called Duffel Bag Boy. Now go and get your money, little duffel bag boy, featuring Lil Wayne. Now most don't even realize that one of the guys rapping the verses was an early 2 Chainz, then known as Titty Boy. I mean, at the time, there was no 2 Chainz, right? So how many of you remember having a favorite rapper named Titty Boy? Exactly. But Duffel Bag Boy was hot, and it featured Lil Wayne just around the peak of his take over the rap game superpowers, where he was just killing verses, hooks, just about everything that he touched. Duffel Bag Boy was no exception. So Wayne's the one who really shined on this, but 2 Chainz might still play it to remind listeners how long he's been in the game, and that that's actually him rapping on Duffel Bag Boy. Shortly after Duffel Bag Boy, a couple Player Circle albums and a few solo mixtapes, Titty Boy eventually left Ludacris's label Disturbing the Peace and went to Def Jam. It was kind of a long, arduous negotiation / battle, and Ludacris's Disturbing the Peace didn't end up really sustaining and having a long run, but keeping 2 Chainz would have really helped with that. So Ludacris didn't want to let Titty Boy / 2 Chainz go, but he eventually left the Def Jam. Now during that same 2007 to 2010 period, Rick Ross dropped his second album, Trilla, in 2008, featuring his highest charting solo single to date, The Boss, featuring the chorus killer of the era, T-Pain. If T-Pain was on the hook, it was probably going to be fire. And The Boss was a huge breakthrough song. So anyone who didn't know about Rick Ross after Hustlin', Port of Miami, and the early Khaled features, they knew about him now. That song was all over the radio, was one of the biggest rap songs of the year, and it elevated Ross's stature tremendously. That Trilla album also had Speedin' with R. Kelly, which I think you kind of have to leave that one out now, yeah? Given Kells' rep, he might want to stay away from that one. It's also got Here I Am with Nelly and Avery Storm, which he might play, but I doubt it. Then it's got the original Maybach Music song, featuring Jay-Z, which he could play, but I'd guess he'd rather play other versions of Maybach Music from his later albums. But he might play the original, and he would go on to name his record label Maybach Music, so there's a huge significance in this series of Maybach Music songs. Maybach Music, which actually did have a long run. I mean, they had Wale, Meek Mill, Rick Ross, but it was actually his next album, Deeper Than Rap, that he dropped the following year, 2009, that made Ross not only the star that he was on his way to becoming with Hustlin' and The Boss, but a skillful artistic force to be reckoned with, who was demonstrating expert beat selection as well as the use of irony, comedy, ruthlessness, vulnerability, and was able to mix all those up within a verse or song. But he did it with a voice that was more in the vein of Biggie Smalls, where you're either blessed with that or you're not. Look, 99% of rappers cannot find a combination of words in this universe of language that will sound as fresh as a Biggie saying, "When the la la hits." So Ross has one of these voices, and Deeper Than Rap is Rick Ross's tour de force, so to speak. In fact, this is the best album between these two Verzuz legends. It's also the most critically acclaimed album and the most respected among the hip-hop heads. It also brought Ross closer to the imaginary but so often discussed pantheon of the greats. He ascended a couple of tiers with Deeper Than Rap, which was still rarefied air for a southern rapper. And yeah, it's pretty messed up when you hear it like that, but the traditional New York rap media bias that existed throughout the 80s and 90s was losing influence pretty quickly. So now, Scarface of the Ghetto Boys and Andre 3000 of Outkast aren't the only southern rappers invited to this club and listed onto the Mount Rushmores. You had Ludacris break in the early 2000s. Lil Wayne ended up transcending any region, or planet for that matter. They eventually even gave Bun B of Underground Kings, UGK, his respect. T.I. and Young Jeezy were also two kings throughout that 2000s decade. So Deeper Than Rap got Ross into those discussions. That album is so good that if we're comparing these artists' body of work and merit purely through the quality of their music catalogs, Deeper Than Rap nearly makes this a game, set, match. It's that dope. Songs you might expect to hear from it are Maybach Music 2 featuring T-Pain, Lil Wayne, and Kanye. What'd I tell you about those T-Pain hooks? Magnificent with John Legend, Usual Suspects with Nas was fire, one of my favorites. Laid Back with Robin Thicke, Rich Off Cocaine with Avery Storm, both of those are great non-single album songs. And those last three, Usual Suspects, Laid Back, and Rich Off Cocaine, are just the type of non-single album cuts that make Deeper Than Rap so damn good. And I still might have left off the best song on the whole damn album, and that's the opening song, Mafia Music. That song has its opening beat build-up that sounds just as anthemic as The Boss's opening. And then once the vocal chorus and the beat continues to build and then the drum finally drops, it launches Rick Ross into immediately sounding like rap's Isaac Hayes or Barry White, but the pure gangsta version. Even having the audacity to drop names like 50 Cent and Floyd Mayweather in ways that would create a beef, both personal and rap, that exists to this day. 50 Cent doesn't let things go easy. This album had Rose coming out swinging from the opening bell, and that opening bell is Mafia Music. It's chilling, and when it dropped, it felt like a whoa moment in hip-hop. It changed the way the audiences viewed Rick Ross, the rapper. But this is where it gets complicated. His reputation, with the help of some pictures of him as a correctional officer and stoked by the constant antagonizing of 50 Cent, Ross's rep took a huge hit credibility-wise in terms of being believable in the role of the character that he's portraying in his songs. For what it's worth, a big part of hip-hop, rap specifically, the MC even more specifically, has been the projection of the persona. Ross lost a lot of that type of respect and hasn't totally recovered since. But on the music end, he just trudged forward and started rattling off hits that made it kind of quieted a lot of the noise, never silenced it completely. And there's always been this hanging cloud of, just this hanging cloud of skepticism. But yeah, on the music end, he would continue to blow up even more monstrously over the next 4 years in 2 albums, and wouldn't start falling off until a few years later, 2014. So it's that run after Deeper Than Rap, 2010 to 2013, where he has most of his hit songs. The albums Teflon Don and God Forgives I Don't, as well as the outstanding Rich Forever mixtape between the two, and his features at the time, included the songs Super High with Neo, BMF, I Think I'm Big Meech, Larry Hoover. See, Ross is doubling down on the persona, and it's working largely because the music is so damn gripping, and Ross's talent in painting the imagery is that good. Rick Ross was on the All I Do Is Win, 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 another T-Pain chorus, posse cut at the time, and was becoming one of the most sought after featured guests. He's got the opening verse on Monster, the Kanye classic, with Jay-Z and probably the most iconic Nicki Minaj verse to date. Rick Ross is on Devil in a Blue Dress from that same My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy album, classic album. He had Ashton Martin music with Drake and Chrisette Michele, Lord Knows from Drake's Take Care album, 2011. Stay Schemin' with Drake and French Montana from that Rich Forever mixtape. Diced Pineapples with Wale and Drake. Noticing a pattern here? Rose and Drizzy have had a pretty dope alliance, and Drake even rapped. Besides Ricky Ross, Aubrey the biggest boss here. There are a lot of Drizzy and Ross collabs, which can only strengthen one's catalog, right? I'm On One is another hit with Drake and Lil Wayne. Technically a DJ Khaled song, major hit. Speaking of Lil Wayne, there's also John from the Carter 4, which also features Rick Ross. More features include Usher's Let Me See, French Montana's Pop That with Lil Wayne and Drake, Bugatti by Ace Hood, You Ain't Even Know. That's UOENO. Remember that song by Rocco with Future? That's a great one, but Ross's verse ended up costing him a Reebok deal because it depicted drugging and raping a woman. Probably don't want to play that one. But the beat by Childish Major is pure magic. Check out the instrumental only if you don't want to support listening to the words. You know. He had the Maybach Music compilations that did pretty well. It was a series called Self-Made, Volume 1, 2, and I think 3. Self-Made Volume 1 had Tupac back with Meek Mill and Rick Ross. It also had I'm a Boss with Meek Mill and Rick Ross. Self-Made 2 had Bag of Money with Ross, Meek Mill, and T-Pain. But Ross's peak run of popularity would start to cool off beginning in 2014. The Mastermind album, the Hood Billionaire album, both released in 2014. And although the albums that followed, Black Market, Rather You Than Me, Port of Miami 2, proved to be good, quality albums, especially those first two, once you start sliding down that path that there's just less energy and enthusiasm around your music's aura, sometimes no amount of quality can recover that intrigue. And I think that that's where Ross found himself from 2014 onward, not to mention the different health issues, seizures, and so forth that he's had in recent years. But there's still some bangers peppered in there. We might get treated to the latest 2 Drake collabs, Money in the Bank and Gold Roses, both from last year, 2019. Is there any way you could have a Rick Ross versus without a ton of Drizzy? I wonder how he's going to handle that. Anyway, there is an opponent here, 2 Chainz, and his departure from Disturbing the Peace and Playa Circle led to a string of mixtapes and features, collabs with Luda, Chingy, Lil Wayne, Gucci Mane, Gutta Gutta, Gorilla Zoe. No blockbuster hits or anything yet, but each mixtape release growing in popularity, Codeine Cowboy and True Religion, both in 2011 being the biggest, and then boom, the songs I'm riding around, I'm getting it, I'm riding around, I'm getting it, it's mine, I spend it. And then the Mercy song, that was the Cruel Summer, or the Good Summer, whichever it was, the Kanye Good Music collab. The song Mercy with Kanye, Big Sean, Pusha T, and Rick Ross. And this was at the time of the Big Sean pioneered phrase-to-word association punchlines, where you give the description and then the punchline ends up being the word that was just referenced. For example, on the song Viagra from the 2011 True Religion mixtape, 2 Chainz raps, I be going hard, Viagra. I be going hard, Viagra. This was definitely a style of the era. And songs like these are what led to that time I described earlier where you couldn't turn on a radio without hearing a 2 Chainz single or a feature. 2 Chainz ended up being ubiquitous in rap. You couldn't get away from it. And his microphone presence is that of a Black Thought in terms of just the imposing vocal quality. And 2 Chainz' humor and wit are super underrated. His presence on the track is so major that people actually sleep on the nuance of his lyrics, but he's always had it. And he still showcases it in his verses and songs today. And also, shout out to my homeboy, one of my best friends, like a dear brother from another, you already know, Josh Martin, for putting me up on 2 Chainz back when he was Titty Boy, and I was totally, aside from Duffel Bag Boy, I just wasn't really feeling that style of rap. We were just kind of getting out of the ringtone era, songs like Laffy Taffy and stuff. I kind of associated 2 Chainz' movement with that movement, which there might be some overlap, but I mean, 2 Chainz was kind of a force unto itself, and it was through my homie introducing me to his music and songs like Pimps with, who was it? Was it Big Crit on the song with 2 Chainz? But it was Pimps from, I think, the Codeine Cowboy or True Religion mixtape that really kind of sold me and convinced me that, yeah, pay attention to this guy. And by the way, in this versus battle, the live element that I predicted would favor Snoop Dogg over DMX in an earlier video, and that favored Jadakiss over Fabulous, where the bigger personality starts to dominate the room, 2 Chainz can decide whether he wants to turn that up or off here, because he's also a pretty genuine and humble dude, but performance-wise, I'd much rather be in a 2 Chainz crowd than a Rose crowd. 2 Chainz had almost like a Busta Rhymes-like charisma at Coachella, I think it was Coachella 2012. Dude's like 6'5", former basketball player, so he's athletically moving around the stage, and it just makes for a more energized show. I don't know how that will all translate in this versus battle, but I think that both of these dudes, being older rappers who both blew up super late age-wise, usually rappers blow up in their early to mid-20s, these guys got famous in their 30s. That's a rarity, but I think that that'll translate to a mutual respect here. I don't think you'll get one of these two being like Jadakiss drunk and not giving a damn about Fabulous's comfort level. I can see the Southern hospitality being in play here. But that 2 Chainz momentum that really accelerated in 2011 took the hell off in 2012, where he then had one of the most sudden one-year breakthroughs I'd ever heard or seen, which included No Lie featuring Drake, Birthday Song with Kanye West, All I Want for My Birthday, Bees in the Trap with Nicki Minaj, I'm Different, Bands That Make Good Dance, the Juicy J hit, I Love Bad Itches, That's My Uckin' Problem, and yeah, I like the I Got a Uckin' Problem, with A$AP Rocky, Drake, and Kendrick. Tell me that hook wasn't a dominating force on that track. Shout out to Drizzy too with that verse though. Damn. Seriously, 2 Chainz could do a versus battle on songs just between 2011 and 2013. R.I.P. Rest in Peace by Jeezy, Talk Dirty by Jason Derulo, All Me by Drake with him and Big Sean, Cut Her Off by K-Camp, We Own It with Wiz Khalifa from the Fast and Furious 6 soundtrack. So 2 Chainz has that crazy 2012, and the Based on the True Story debut album goes into 2013 and drops Based on the True Story 2 or Boats 2. But the singles on that one, Feds Watchin', produced by Pharrell, and Used To, just didn't connect like those 2012 songs. And there then began this quick decline from that upper tier relevancy to where by 2014, 2 Chainz had kind of cooled off. And although he continued to drop music, some of it good, I like that last album, that one from just last year, Rapper Go to the League album, and Pretty Girls Like Trap Music just before that, I think that was like 2017. But there's this court of public opinion that determines what's red hot, and that is usually very fickle and fleeting. So in comparing these two rappers' careers, not only was Rick Ross's high point higher than 2 Chainz's from that second album, Trilla, through the BMF Big Meech era, but Ross also had a more sustained and longer peak. And although 2 Chainz might be releasing music more frequently over the past 3 to 5 years, look, Vince Carter can play an extra 10 years, 30 years in the league. It's not going to elevate him above Tracy McGrady, career legacy-wise. I don't know, maybe we could revisit that one and have the Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady discussion, but you kind of get what I'm saying. You can stick around, but it's about like what your peak relevancy was and how long that sustained high level of quality mixed with the public's reception or intrigue in that quality. So you could be dropping quality albums and there's it's essentially a tree falling with nobody there to hear it, or you could be super popular and not have the quality. I'm saying that Ross had a bigger peak where both of those things were at a high level. And that's where we'll leave this one for now. I think Rick Ross edges this one, maybe more than edges this one, but I mean, you're only playing 20 songs, so 2 Chainz can fill up 20 songs. If you extend it to like 40 songs, and this is the same thing I was saying about Snoop versus DMX, that's where the true depth and breadth of work would then come into play. You know, where only like certain artists can hold it down for like a 40 to 60 song verses as opposed to 20. 20 is basically like a long greatest hits, and I think that 2 Chainz can make a greatest hits album if you include his features. So he'll be okay here, but I think that Ross still has the edge. But this will also showcase just how hot 2 Chainz was, and that he was a special talent when he hit the game and continues to serve as a solid figure and ambassador, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. But if we're looking purely at music catalog and how they could apply their hits throughout this versus battle, Rick Ross should come away with the win. Although I'd be careful on including too much Drake here. I mean, damn. And I only mention all these Drake songs because if you look at the songs that like charted higher, a lot of the songs that charted higher for Ross were features where it was a him and Drake collaboration, because almost everything Drake touches ascends up the Billboard Hot 100 charts. But let me know your thoughts on these 2 artists, their catalogs, and their legacies. Is it a foregone conclusion that Rick Ross wins this, or are we sleeping on 2 Chainz? And I know we didn't really get into Rick Ross's name, his artist name itself, Rick Ross, and the fact that he borrowed that from Freeway Ricky Ross, one of the most infamous and at the time successful drug dealers. So he's taking the name Ricky Ross and he's name dropping the Big Meeches. It's just an interesting dynamic when you really get into the Rick Ross career and the figure that he portrays through the songs, which kind of evolved over time and became this more elder statesman, entrepreneur, you know, role model even. But yeah, early to mid Ross career was all, you know, serving cocaine. But yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the music talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.